We have lived in Kansas City for 4 years now. This is the story of how we got here. For 29 years, I grew up in Los Angeles. I never ever considered living anywhere else, much less in the middle of the country in Kansas City, Missouri. And yet here we are. We started this move when we were back in 2018. Before that, I would have said I was going to live in California for the rest of my life. And here's what started to change. So for 29 years, California was my home, and I loved it. It was the best. I loved the beaches. I had a ton of great friends. I loved all the delicious food. My family moved there 4 years before I was born from Malaysia, and they called that place their home. And I really thought I was going to live and die my whole life in California. If you stick around until the end, I'm going to tell you the 3 things that we should have done differently when we moved here to Kansas City. But I got married in 2017 to my beautiful wife, Emily. I met Emily at a wedding back in 2015. We really hit it off. A year later, we were engaged. 6 months after that, we were married. Life was super good. We were living in 300 square feet in this little converted master bedroom, and we were paying like I think $1,100 a month for that little apartment. We didn't have a kitchen. We had a little kitchenette. We couldn't really get any produce or any groceries because we didn't have any place to put them. We just had a little mini fridge that we kind of stuffed all our stuff in, and we shopped a lot at Costco because they had a lot of pre-made meals. But that was basically life back then, and life was super good. But we initially got the yearning to get a bigger place when we started thinking about adopting. Now, my wife, Emily, is from South Korea. She was born in South Korea, but she was adopted by a Caucasian family, and she was raised in the Philippines. And so adoption has always been something extremely near and dear to our hearts, and something that we had felt based on our religious convictions, based on being Christians, that we wanted to do for a very long time. And so we applied for adoption, and that meant that we needed to get a bigger place. So we applied for adoption in California, but nothing really ever came of that, because right after we applied for adoption, we got pregnant with our first son, Keller. And this was late 2018, and at the same time we got pregnant, I also started my PhD program at a seminary called Midwestern Seminary here in Kansas City, Missouri. It's north of the river. I live south of the river now, but when I first moved out here, I lived really close to the seminary. I'll tell you about all that place. I'll tell you all about that later. But anyways, back to 2018, we wanted to adopt. We ended up getting pregnant, and we had to move to a bigger location. So we ended up renting a 1,400 square foot 2-bedroom house for $3,500 a month. Now, if you're looking, if you're from different parts of the country, you might say, wow, $3,500 a month is a ton of money. And that's right, it was a ton of money, especially for us. But I was working as a pastor, Emily was working as an ER nurse. We had dual income. We decided, hey, we can make it work. Now, if you live in California now, $3,500 a month probably doesn't sound like that much, but this was back in 2018, 2019, so $3,500 a month, especially for a young family of 2, was a lot of money. But we really enjoyed it. We were living the life, like I said before. We were having a great time. We had a ton of friends. I was working at the church. Emily was working at her new job. We would go to the beach. We would go camping all the time. We had our dog named Albus. It was great. Everything was fantastic. Now, the first inclination that we needed to think about moving, that life in California was not going to work, was that Keller came in 2019. September 2019, my son was born. My first son, Keller Jackson Wong, one of the greatest blessings that God has ever given to me, was born. He joined our family. And we kind of thought, okay, well, if we live in California, we'll never have a chance to really buy a house, because my job wasn't high paying enough to really afford that. Emily's job wasn't high paying enough to maybe afford that in the future. And so we kind of put our brains together and said, okay, if we ever want to make a home somewhere, a permanent home somewhere, we either have to wait until my mom passes away and we can inherit her house. Maybe we could take over her mortgage. Maybe we could do something like that, but we would still have to live with my mom. So if we wanted to leave that life and we wanted to make a life for ourselves, we could not stay in Southern California. I mean, the average home price back then was probably right around $700,000 to $800,000. Now, the average home price is probably higher than that, definitely higher than that. Not an LA home expert, but definitely higher than that now. And we said there's no way we can even come up with the down payment necessary to afford a home in Southern California, much less pay a mortgage every month to live there. It was just going to be way too expensive, so we were going to have to leave California. So at that time, we had considered moving to a few places. I applied to a church in Houston. I actually thought about applying. I actually applied to a church in Vermont. Both of those didn't work out. We even thought about moving over to Hawaii. We thought about moving to Alaska. We thought about moving overseas, living as missionaries, but none of those things really worked out. And so, like I said before, I was already in school at a school based here in Kansas City, and I had come to visit Kansas City a few times, and I said, babe, what if we considered moving to Kansas City? I'm already going to school there. I'm already traveling there. What if we looked at what life would look like here in Kansas City, Missouri? And you know, for people who have never considered moving out of a place where they lived their whole life, that really was the first kind of domino to kind of fall, at least in my mind, was that, hey, I could live somewhere else. Conceptually, I never even thought about that. Like I said before, I had thought that I was going to be born in California, spend my entire life in California, and die in California. I never thought that I could live and relocate my family somewhere else. And conceptually, it wasn't something that I had really kind of processed. And so I would encourage you, wherever you're watching, think about this. What would life look like if you could actually afford to buy a house? What would life look like for you if you could move to an area where cost of living was significantly lower where it is right now? Now, I don't know where you're watching this from. You might be watching this from a really small town in Kansas, and you could say, hey, Kansas City, it would actually be way higher cost of living than where I live right now. That's great. Everybody has their own goals, and that's totally fine. But for us, one of our goals after we had Keller was that, hey, we really want to have a parent at home, because we really believed, for both of us, that it was really important for our kids to know that to primarily receive care from their parents, from their mom, from their dad. And it was going to be impossible to do that with requiring to be a dual income family. I was never going to earn a ton of money in being a pastor. I was never going to be making over six figures, probably ever doing that in my career. And Emily made a decent income, but she was a starting nurse at a small ER in Southern California, and she made probably like $60,000 to $70,000, and together we made over $100,000. But when rent is $3,500 a month, you can see that that's really eating into your budget in terms of your future, wanting to save, in terms of if you needed to buy a $600,000 house or $700,000 house. I mean, all of that was really prohibitive for us, and so we decided that California was not going to be for us. And again, that was the first domino to fall. So if you're thinking about it, maybe imagine what life would look like somewhere else. I had all the reasons not to want to move out of California. I love the weather. I love the food. I love my friends. I still keep in touch with my friends. A lot of my closest friends would still be in California. I call them consistently, and I check up on them, and I still love them. But I tell them, hey, consider what your life would look like if you moved out of California. Consider what you would look like, your life would look like if you moved from New York, or if you moved from Florida, if you moved to a place where cost of living was a lot lower. And it's worked out for our family, and you want to think through all of those things, because it could open a whole new way of life that you didn't even know was possible. Another key thing in convincing us to move out here to Kansas City was that we wanted to own investment properties. And in California, if we couldn't even get one house, how are we going to get multiple houses? I mean, the cost of living was just way too high. We were never going to be able to afford to get investment properties. And so living out here in Kansas City, we've since gotten 2 investment properties, and it's been great. It's been passive. I mean, passive in that we still have to manage the rental properties, but it's been great having that source of income that was unlocked to us here in Kansas City just because of the house prices that was impossible in California. And so once the decision was made to move, we started looking here in Kansas City, and we got connected to a real estate agent, and she kind of sat down. She was like the only person we knew in Kansas City. So this was a huge leap of faith, right? We got connected to her, and we started talking to her about places to avoid, about places where you want to target. We had already kind of identified a church from afar, even though we hadn't met anybody from that church. We're saying, hey, we're going to go to this church when we get to Kansas City. And so we told her, hey, can you try to help us find a house near this church? I'm going to be going to the seminary. Can you try to help us find a house near the seminary? And so she did so, and we found a house in Gladstone. But she gave us a whole list of places to avoid. And so we finally found a house in Gladstone, Missouri, which is a suburb of Kansas City. And we put an offer down, and a few days later it was accepted, and we were going to move to Kansas City. Here's the crazy thing. We had never stepped foot in our house before we put an offer in. We had never stepped foot in our house, actually, even before we closed on the house. It was crazy. I would not recommend it. As a real estate agent now, I would not recommend that. If you're looking to move to Kansas City, I have since become a real estate agent, and I've helped a ton of people move from all over the place, from Utah, from New York, from Nevada, other people from California. people from Oregon, people from Florida. And I think that I've grown to specialize in helping especially out-of-state movers move here, relocate here to Kansas City to make the process super smooth for you. So please reach out to me, call or text 816-4-MOVE-KC, 816-4-MOVE-KC. I also put my email down below. We also have agents that speak Spanish. So if you're looking to move here and you want a predominantly Spanish-speaking agent, I can help you with that too. 816-4-MOVE-KC. Reach out to us today. And so we had our house in Gladstone. We decided that what was going to happen was I was going to drive with two of my friends, drive all our stuff, drive our two cats, drive our one dog out to Kansas City, and Emily was going to fly with my newborn son, Keller Jackson Wong, who was born in 2019. And so she flew, we picked her up at the airport, we met her out here, and then in January of 2020, we closed on our home in Gladstone, and we stepped into our home, like I said, for the first time after we had already bought it. So we had better like it. And you know what? Guess what? It worked out. We loved it. We still own that home today. It's an investment property. And so since then, we've added one kid to our family. We've added 2 investment properties to our family. And now we live south of the river in Midtown, Kansas City. And we love it here. It is so cool. We're so close to all these incredible things that Kansas City has to offer. Comment down below if you want that story from us moving up from Gladstone to Midtown, how we chose this area, all the things that kind of had to work out for us to move into this particular house. We love it here. Now, for the 3 things that we would do differently if we had to make the move again, the first thing that we would do differently is we would have considered the Kansas side. Since becoming a real estate agent, I really wish we would have looked really closely at the Kansas side. Prairie Village, Overland Park, Olathe, Miriam, all of those places we could have afforded back then, and we didn't even give those places a thought. Those places are just fantastic places to live, fantastic places to raise your children. I mean, those places are incredible and amazing. And if I had to do it all over again, I would look very closely at those areas. I never even considered those areas because I was told, hey, don't even look in Kansas. I don't know who told me that. I can't pin it. It wasn't my real estate agent or something like that. I was just told, don't look in Kansas. And so I didn't, but I wish I would have looked in Kansas. So if you're looking, look in both states. The second mistake that we made was these bad areas that my real estate agent told me about. You know, we didn't live in like a super gang infested area in Los Angeles, but we didn't live in like the suburbs either. We lived in an area that I would say for Los Angeles is below average in terms of safety and crime. There's a little bit of crime there, a little bit more than a lot of people would have been comfortable with, and we were okay with that. There were a lot of homeless people around our house. There was a lot of crime and criminal activity around where we lived, but we were comfortable with it. We had gotten used to it, and it wasn't a deterrent for us. So what I would have done is when I got the list of areas to avoid from our real estate agent, I wish I would have just come and visited and spent some time in those areas and been around those neighborhoods and talked to those people who lived in that area, because honestly, I probably would have chosen a house south of the river if I would have done that. We love living south of the river. We love all of the things that we have access to downtown, Union Station, Nelson Atkins Museum. All of those things are super close to where we live right now. Country Club Plaza, where it was quite a bit of a drive from coming from up north. And so I really would have considered this area earlier if I would have just visited and seen, because, you know, for my real estate agent, she has a conception of what a bad area is, but she grew up here, right? For me, I grew up in Los Angeles, and for my conception of what a bad area is, I probably have a larger tolerance for that. So my advice to you, if you're looking to move, is come and visit. Come and look at these different areas that people call bad and see how they compare to where you come from. And you know what? Maybe you don't want to be in these higher crime areas, and that's totally fine because you're coming from a really small, really quiet country town out in the middle of nowhere. That's awesome. And you want somewhere with no crime, we can help you find those areas too, but you really have to come and visit, and you really have to come and get the atmosphere of these different areas, because if you don't do that yourself, you won't know how your family fits in. You won't know how you fit into these different areas. Talk to the neighbors. Talk to the people that live here. Most people, they do want to help you out. I can't tell you how many people I've helped buy a house here, and we'll go and knock on 2 or 3 different doors in that area, and we'll say, what's your experience living like? What's your experience like living here in Independence? What's your experience living here in Blue Hills? And they'll tell you. They'll say, man, this is horrible. Let me tell you a quick story. One buyer who was moving here from New York, we had found a house on Wayne Street, Wayne, And so we loved the house. It was a beautiful house. So we knocked on the next door neighbor's door, and we said, hey, what's it like living on Wayne Street? And he leaned back and he said, let me tell you, we call this street Nightmare on Wayne Street. And he went on to detail about the shootings and the gun crime and the drive-bys that happened there. And obviously we were like, okay, we're not gonna buy this house, obviously, right? And you need to do that type of research because you need to know what type of area you're moving into. Here's the third mistake that we made, and that is not house hacking. If you don't know what house hacking is, that's where you might buy a duplex or you might buy a multifamily, you live in one and then you rent out the others. If we would have done that in Gladstone, I think we could have afforded something really nice, and we could have had 2 duplexes because we actually own another duplex in a different part of Kansas City. But we could have moved into a duplex in Gladstone, and then we could have lived there, rented out one side while we lived there to offset our mortgage to save even more. And then when we moved out of that side, when we moved out of the side that we were living in, we could have rented out that side and then gotten double the money. So wish I would have done that. That's not for everybody though, because not everybody wants to live in a multifamily house where they're sharing a wall with their neighbor, right? Not everybody wants to immediately be a landlord. But I think we could have done it. If I had to do it again, I think I would have done that.